The thick green leaves brushed against Jake Morrison's face as he pushed deeper into the alien jungle. His heavy boots sank into the wet ground with each step. Behind him, 3 other soldiers followed in a straight line. The air was so thick. He could barely breathe even with his helmet's air filter working at full power. Jake stopped and looked at his scanner. The small screen showed weak signals coming from somewhere ahead. The crashed ship was close now. He had been walking through this nightmare jungle for 2 days looking for survivors. So far they had found nothing but empty metal pieces and burned ground. The planet Zarian 7 was not made for living things like humans. The air was full of poison. Strange plants tried to grab anyone who walked too close. The trees grew so thick that sunlight barely reached the ground. Most alien races stayed far away from planets like this one. They were too smart to risk their lives in such dangerous places, but Jake was human and humans did things differently. When the distress signal came from the crashed ship Aurora's Dream, the human military sent a rescue team right away. Other alien species might have waited or sent robots instead. Humans went themselves. Jake's team had already lost 2 good soldiers to the jungle. Peter stepped on a plant that shot poisonous darts into his leg. He died in 10 minutes. Rodriguez tried to drink water from a stream and fell over dead before anyone could stop him. The jungle wanted to kill everything that did not belong there. Still, Jake kept moving forward. His job was to find survivors and bring them home. It did not matter that this place was trying to kill him. It did not matter that most people would call this mission crazy. Someone might still be alive out there waiting for help. The jungle around them was full of strange sounds. Things howled in the distance. Leaves rustled even when there was no wind. Sometimes Jake heard what sounded like whispers, but he knew it was just his mind playing tricks on him. The poison in the air made people see and hear things that were not real. Sergeant Lisa Hayes walked behind Jake. She kept checking her weapon and looking around nervously. She thought this mission was a waste of time. 3 days had passed since the crash. Anyone still alive would be dead by now. The jungle killed everything quickly, but Jake had a feeling someone was still out there. He could not explain why. It was just something he felt deep inside. His grandmother used to tell him that humans had special instincts that helped them know when other living things needed help. Maybe she was right. The crashed ship had been carrying Catherian diplomats to a peace meeting. Jake had never seen a Catherian before. His officers told him they were small blue aliens who were very weak and fragile. They could talk to each other with their minds instead of using their voices. Most humans thought they were strange but harmless. The Catherians were trying to make a deal about mining rights on some distant planet. Pirates had attacked their ship and forced them to crash land here. The pirates probably thought they were being smart by making the ship crash on Zarian 7. No one would try to rescue anyone from such a deadly place. They were wrong about humans, though. Humans would go anywhere to save lives. It was just how they were made. Jake's scanner started beeping faster. The signal was getting stronger. He held up his hand and his team stopped moving. They were very close to the crash site now. Jake could smell burning metal in the air. Smoke was still rising from somewhere ahead. The trees opened up into a clearing where the Aurora's Dream had hit the ground. The ship was broken into 3 large pieces. Metal was scattered everywhere. The front part of the ship was buried deep in the ground. The middle section was crushed flat. Only the back part looked like it might still have space inside for survivors. Jake's team spread out around the crash site. They moved carefully and kept their weapons ready. The jungle was full of predators that hunted during the day. The smell of blood and death would bring them running. Lisa checked her scanner and shook her head. No life signs anywhere. The crash had been too violent. Anyone inside would have been killed right away. She wanted to mark the site and call for pickup. There was nothing they could do here, but Jake was not ready to give up yet. He walked closer to the wreckage and listened carefully. The jungle was never completely quiet. There were always insects buzzing and small animals moving around, but sometimes Jake thought he heard something else. Something that sounded almost like crying. He stopped and held his breath. There it was again. very faint and far away, but it sounded like someone calling for help. It was not coming from the wreckage, though. It was coming from deeper in his head, like a whisper inside his mind. Jake had heard stories about Cytherian mind talking, but he never believed them. Humans could not hear thoughts like that. But something was definitely trying to reach him. Some kind of desperate signal that felt like pure fear and pain. He followed the feeling toward the buried front section of the ship. His boots crunched on broken glass and twisted metal. Steam was still rising from the hot wreckage. The front of the ship had hit the ground so hard it made a deep hole. Jake climbed down into the hole and started moving pieces of metal aside. His team called after him, but he ignored them. Something was alive down there. He could feel it getting stronger as he got closer. Someone was trapped and hurt and calling out for anyone who could hear them. The voice in his head was getting clearer now. It was definitely female and definitely terrified. She was asking for help in a language he could not understand, but the fear was universal. Every living thing knew what it felt like to be scared and alone. Jake worked faster, pulling away the wreckage. His hands were bleeding inside his gloves, but he did not stop. Somewhere under all this twisted metal was someone who needed him. Someone who had been waiting 3 days for rescue that might never come. Finally, Jake saw a small space between two large pieces of the ship's hull. Inside the space, something moved. Something small and blue and very much alive. Jake shined his flashlight into the small space between the metal pieces. A pair of large violet eyes stared back at him. The creature inside made a soft sound that might have been a whimper. She was definitely alive but badly hurt. The Cytherian was smaller than Jake expected. She looked almost like a human child, but with pale blue skin and long silver hair. Her clothes were torn and bloody. A heavy beam had fallen across her legs and trapped her against the ship's wall. She had been stuck there for 3 days. When Jake reached toward her, she pulled back in fear. His bulky armor and helmet made him look like some kind of machine monster. She had never seen a human before and did not know if he was there to help or hurt her. Her people had heard scary stories about the violent humans who solved everything with weapons and force. Jake realized he was frightening her, so he pulled off his helmet. The jungle air hit his face like a wall of poison, but he ignored the burning in his lungs. He needed her to see that he was just another living being who wanted to help. The Cytherian stared at Jake's face with wonder. She had expected something terrible, but he looked almost normal. His skin was darker than hers, and his eyes were brown instead of violet, but he had the same basic shape as her own people. More importantly, she could see kindness in his expression. He was not here to hurt her. Jake tried to talk to her, but his words came out wrong in the thick air. His translator device was having trouble with her language. She spoke in musical tones that rose and fell like singing. When she tried to reach his mind with her telepathic voice, it felt like whispers at the edge of his thoughts. Instead, Jake used hand signals to show he wanted to help. He pointed to the metal beam across her legs and made lifting motions. The Cytherian nodded and tried to move, but cried out in pain. The beam was too heavy and her legs might be broken underneath it. Jake called to his team for help. Lisa and the other 2 soldiers came down into the crash site, but they were not happy about it. They thought Jake was wasting time and taking stupid risks. The jungle was dangerous enough without stopping to help weak aliens who would probably die anyway, but Jake ignored their complaints and started working to free the trapped Cytherian. He used a metal rod as a lever to lift the beam while Lisa pulled the alien girl out from underneath. The Cytherian screamed when they moved her, but she was finally free from the wreckage. Jake looked at her injuries and felt sick. Both of her legs were badly broken. Long cuts covered her arms and face. Worst of all, he could see small moving things under her skin. Some kind of jungle parasite had found her wounds and started eating her from the inside. Most soldiers would have given up at this point. The injuries were too severe, and the parasites were already too deep. Even if they could get her to a hospital, she would probably die on the way. It would be kinder to just make her comfortable and let nature take its course, but Jake had brought medical supplies and he was not ready to quit yet. He gave the Cytherian a shot for the pain and started cleaning her wounds with antiseptic. She watched him work with amazement. Her own people would have calculated the odds of survival and made logical decisions based on resources and probability. Jake did not think that way. He saw someone who needed help and he helped them. It was that simple. He used his field surgery kit to remove the parasites one by one. The Catherian tried to help by pointing to places where she could feel them moving, but mostly she just tried to stay conscious. While Jake worked on the medical treatment, his team set up a defensive circle around the crash site. The jungle was full of predators and the smell of blood would attract them soon. Lisa kept checking her scanner and reporting movement in the trees around them. The Catherian tried to tell Jake her name through the broken translator. It sounded something like Zara when he said it back to her. She smiled when he got it mostly right. Then she tried to ask his name and he told her Jake. She repeated it several times, trying to get the sounds right. As the sun started to set, the jungle became even more dangerous. Jake could hear things moving in the darkness beyond the trees. His team's motion detectors were picking up large shapes circling their position. Whatever lived in this jungle was getting ready to attack. Then the screaming started. High-pitched shrieks came from all directions as a pack of creatures rushed toward the crash site. Jake had never seen anything like them. They looked like giant cats but with razor-sharp tails and too many teeth. Lisa called them screamers and started shooting immediately. The battle was short but intense. Jake's team had good weapons and training, but the screamers were fast and smart. They attacked from multiple directions and tried to separate the humans. Jake had to leave Zara's side to help fight, but he kept looking back to make sure she was safe. When the last screamer was dead, Jake rushed back to check on Zara. She was staring at him with a new expression. She had watched him fight the monsters with controlled violence and precise teamwork. Then, as soon as the danger was over, he had come back to take care of her injuries again. This was not what Zara expected from the brutal humans in the stories. Her people told Jake had risked his life to save her, and now he was gently bandaging her wounds. He shared his water and food with her, even though supplies were limited. His team thought he was being foolish, but Jake did not care what they thought. As night fell completely, Jake's team made camp around the wreckage. They set up motion sensors and took turns on guard duty. The jungle never slept, and neither could they. But Jake stayed next to Zara and tried to make her comfortable, through hand signals and broken translation. They started to communicate better. Zara learned that Jake was a soldier whose job was to rescue people in danger. Jake learned that Zara was a diplomat who had been trying to make peace between different species. They both understood that they were far from home and in terrible danger, but somehow sitting together in the alien jungle did not feel as scary as it should have. Zara felt safer with Jake nearby. Jake felt like he was doing something important by protecting her. Neither of them knew what would happen next, but they were not alone anymore. The jungle howled around them all night, but Jake and Zara talked quietly until dawn. They were from different worlds and different species, but they both understood what it meant to care about others. That was enough to build a friendship on. When morning came, Jake faced an impossible choice. The extraction point was 50 kilometers away through the deadliest parts of the jungle. His team could make the journey in 2 days if they moved fast and took no breaks. But carrying Zara would slow them down and put everyone at risk. Lisa pulled Jake aside and spoke quietly but firmly. They should leave the alien behind and call for medical evacuation instead. The jungle's interference made long-range communication almost impossible, but they might get lucky. Even if they could not reach their base, the alien would die quickly. Without suffering too much, Jake looked back at Zara, who was trying to sit up despite her broken legs. She was weak and pale, but her violet eyes still held determination. She wanted to live, and she trusted Jake to help her. He could not abandon someone who had fought so hard to survive for 3 days alone. So Jake made his decision. He would carry Zara himself no matter what it cost. Using pieces from the wreckage, he built a makeshift stretcher that could be strapped to his back. It would be heavy and awkward, but it was better than leaving her to die. The other soldiers thought Jake had lost his mind. Carrying a wounded alien would mean he could not use his weapons properly. He would be slow and clumsy and dangerous too. The whole team Most humans would have made the smart choice and left her behind, but Jake was not most humans. He strapped the stretcher to his armor and helped Zara climb onto it. She was so light he barely felt her weight at first. Her people were built for thinking and talking, not for heavy work or fighting. That was probably why they were considered weak by other species. The journey started badly and got worse. The jungle seemed to know they were trying to leave and threw everything it had at them. Acid rain fell from the twisted trees, burning holes in their equipment. The ground was covered with plants that grabbed at their feet and tried to pull them down into hidden pits. Jake struggled with the extra weight of the stretcher. His armor's power system was not designed for carrying passengers. After just 2 hours of walking, his legs were shaking and his back was on fire. But every time he thought about setting Zara down, she would squeeze his shoulder gently to let him know she was still there. The jungle was full of things that wanted to eat them. Carnivorous plants released sweet-smelling gas that made people dizzy and careless. Then they would grab anyone who came too close and slowly digest them alive. Jake's team had to test every step and watch for moving vines. On the first day, they covered less than 10 kilometers. At this rate, they would run out of food and water long before reaching the extraction point. Lisa suggested again that they should leave Zara behind, but Jake refused to even discuss it. He had made his choice, and he would stick with it no matter what happened. That night they found shelter in a small cave, but it was already occupied. Thousands of insect-like creatures covered the walls and ceiling. The bugs were not immediately dangerous, but they made a constant buzzing sound that prevented anyone from sleeping properly. Jake sat up all night watching over Zara and fighting off the larger bugs that tried to bite her. Zara felt terrible about being such a burden. Her people valued logic and efficiency above everything else. The smart thing would be for Jake to leave her and save himself and his team. She tried to tell him this through hand signals, but he just shook his head and gave her more water. On the second day, Zara started helping in small ways. Her telepathic abilities were weak, but they still worked better than human technology in the jungle. She could sense predators before they attacked and warn Jake's team. She could also feel which paths were safest to take. When a pack of razor wolves started following their trail, Zara felt them coming long before the motion sensors picked them up. Jake's team was able to set up an ambush and kill the wolves before they could attack. For the first time since the rescue, Zara felt useful instead of helpless. During rest breaks, Jake and Zara continued learning about each other. Jake told her about human ideas like honor and duty and never leaving anyone behind. These concepts were strange to Zara, whose people believed in making choices based on logic and the greatest good for the greatest number. Zara told Jake about Cytherian society where everyone worked together peacefully and shared their thoughts freely. Violence was almost unknown among her people. They solved problems through discussion and compromise. The idea that someone would risk everything to save a stranger made no sense to her logical mind, but as they traveled together, Zara began to understand that human logic was different from Cytherian logic. Jake did not save her because it made mathematical sense. He saved her because it felt right in his heart. His species had survived by protecting each other even when it seemed impossible. On the third day, they reached the most dangerous part of the jungle. The trees here were so thick that no sunlight reached the ground at all. Strange glowing plants provided the only light, and the air was full of hallucinogenic spores that made people see things that were not there. Jake's team started making mistakes. One soldier walked straight into a tree because he thought he saw a clear path. Another tried to shoot at enemies that did not exist. Jake himself began seeing his dead teammates Peters and Rodriguez walking alongside them and trying to talk. To him, only Zara's mental abilities kept them on the right track. She could sense which visions were real and which were false. She guided them around the worst areas and warned them when they were about to walk into traps. Her weak telepathic voice became their compass through the nightmare forest. When they finally emerged from the hallucinogenic zone, Jake's team was exhausted and almost out of supplies. They had less than 1 day of water left, and the extraction point was still 20 kilometers away. Lisa calculated that they could make it if they left Zara behind and ran the rest of the way. Jake looked at Zara, who was unconscious with fever and blood loss. She had saved them all in the nightmare forest, but the effort had nearly killed her. Her breathing was shallow and her pulse was weak. She might not survive another day, even if they carried her carefully, but Jake had not come this far to quit now. He adjusted the straps on his armor and lifted Zara's stretcher again. His team followed him because they were soldiers and he was their officer, but he could see doubt in their eyes. They thought he was leading them all to their deaths for the sake of one weak alien. Maybe they were right. Maybe this was the stupidest thing Jake had ever done. But as they walked through the jungle toward an uncertain future, he felt Zara's hand squeeze his shoulder one more time. She was still fighting to live, and that meant he would keep fighting to save her. The jungle howled around them as they walked deeper into the unknown. On the fourth day of their journey, Jake's team ran into something that should not have been possible to survive. The tracks in the mud told the story before they saw the creatures themselves. 6 clawed footprints, each as long as a human body. Deep gouges in the tree trunks where something had sharpened claws like swords. The unmistakable smell of death and decay that followed apex predators, shadow. Stalkers had found their trail. Lisa checked her scanner and her face went white. 3 of the creatures were moving parallel to their path about a kilometer away. 2 more were coming up from behind. The 6th one was somewhere ahead waiting in ambush. They were completely surrounded by the most dangerous predators on XER Ion-7.0. Military force in the galaxy had ever successfully fought shadow stalkers and lived to tell about it. The creatures were 6 meters tall with stealth technology built into their skin. They could become nearly invisible and move without making any sound. Their claws could cut through military armor like paper. Most importantly, they were smart enough to use tactics and coordinate their attacks. The standard protocol was immediate withdrawal when shadow stalkers were detected. But Jake's team could not run fast enough while carrying Zara. The creatures would catch them in the open jungle where there was no cover and no hope of defense. They were trapped. Lisa activated her emergency beacon and called for immediate extraction. The signal was weak, but it might get through the jungle's interference. If they were very lucky, a rescue ship might reach them before the shadow stalkers attacked. But luck had not been with them much on this mission. Jake carefully lowered Zara's stretcher to the ground and checked his weapons. His rifle had half a magazine left. His sidearm had 2 full clips. It was not nearly enough firepower to fight 6 shadow stalkers, but it was all he had. The other soldiers were in similar condition with low ammunition and damaged equipment. Zara was barely conscious, but she could sense the predators through her telepathic abilities. The creatures' minds were alien and cold, filled with nothing but hunger and the desire to kill. She had never felt anything so purely evil before. Her own people lived in peace and harmony. These things lived only to destroy. Jake knelt beside Zara and spoke quietly. He told her that bad things were coming, but he would protect her as long as he could. She tried to tell him to leave her and save himself, but her voice was too weak and the translator was broken. Instead, she reached up and touched his face gently to let him know she understood. The attack came just before sunset when the jungle was darkest. The first shadow stalker materialized out of thin air right behind one of Jake's soldiers. Private Collins died before he could even scream. His body was torn apart by claws that moved faster than human eyes could follow. The creature disappeared again before anyone could shoot at it. Lisa opened fire at shadows and movement in the trees, but hit nothing. The shadow stalkers were too fast and too smart to be caught by conventional tactics. They struck without warning and vanished immediately. Another soldier went down with his throat torn out. Then another. Jake realized that traditional military thinking would get them all killed. These creatures had evolved to hunt the smart and logical species that made up most of the galaxy, but humans were not always smart and logical. Sometimes they were crazy enough to do things that made no sense. Instead of trying to track the invisible predators, Jake did something unexpected. He grabbed a burning branch from their campfire and started setting the jungle around them on fire. The flames spread quickly in the dry undergrowth, creating smoke and chaos that disrupted the creatures. Stealth abilities. The Shadow Stalkers did not know how to deal with prey that destroyed its own environment. They relied on staying hidden in the jungle, but Jake was burning the jungle down around them. Suddenly, the hunters became visible as dark shapes moving through the smoke and flames. Jake's remaining team members caught on quickly. They used explosive charges to bring down trees and create barriers of burning wood. They threw their remaining chemical supplies into the fire to create toxic smoke that hurt the creature's sensitive senses. They turned the jungle itself into a weapon against the predators, but the Shadow Stalkers were not giving up easily. They began attacking directly instead of using stealth. Jake found himself face to face with a creature that looked like something from a nightmare. Its claws were as long as swords and its teeth could bite through metal. Its eyes glowed red in the FIRELIGT. Jake emptied his rifle into the creature's chest, but it kept coming. He drew his sidearm and kept shooting until he ran out of ammunition. The Shadow Stalker knocked him down and raised its claws to finish him off. Jake closed his eyes and waited for death. Then Zara screamed. It was not a normal scream, but a telepathic shriek that hit every mind within a kilometer. The sound was pure mental agony projected directly into the brain. The Shadow Stalkers staggered backwards with their hands pressed to their heads, trying to block out the psychic attack. Zara had used every bit of her remaining strength to create that scream. Blood ran from her nose and ears from the effort. She collapsed unconscious, but she had given Jake the opening he needed. He grabbed a burning branch and drove it into the Shadow Stalker's face. The creature caught fire and ran screaming into the jungle. The other Shadow Stalkers decided they had had enough of these crazy burning humans. They disappeared into the smoke, leaving behind only the smell of death and the sound of retreating footsteps. Jake crawled over to Zara and checked her pulse. She was still alive, but barely. The telepathic scream had nearly killed her, but she had saved them all. Jake had never seen such courage from someone so small and weak. She had risked everything to protect the human who had protected her. Lisa was the only other survivor from Jake's team. She was badly injured, but still able to move. The jungle around them was burning out of control, and they had to get away from the flames. Lisa helped Jake lift Zara's stretcher, and they stumbled away from the destruction they had created. Behind them, the jungle burned, like a vision of hell. The Shadow Stalkers were gone, but so was most of their equipment. They had no food, no water, and no weapons except for Jake's knife. Zara was dying, and they were still 15 kilometers from the extraction point, but they were alive when they should have been dead. They had fought the most dangerous predators in the galaxy and lived to tell about it. Jake looked down at Zara's pale face and promised her they would make it home. She had saved his life, and now he would save hers no matter what it took. The burning jungle lit up the night sky behind them as they walked toward an uncertain future. But for the first time since the mission started, Jake felt hopeful. They had survived the impossible once. Maybe they could do it again. The rescue shuttle arrived 3 hours after Lisa's emergency beacon finally broke through the jungle's interference. The pilot could not believe what he found at the extraction point. 2 humans barely alive and 1 alien who should have died days ago. The jungle around them was still burning from some kind of massive fire that had destroyed everything for kilometers in every direction. Jake collapsed as soon as he saw the shuttle landing. He had carried Zara for the last 15 kilometers without stopping once. His armor was cracked and broken. His body was full of jungle toxins that should have killed him already. But he had refused to give up until Zara was safe. The medical team rushed both Jake and Zara to the human space station orbiting Zarian 7. The doctors had never treated a Catherian before, but they did their best with what they knew about alien biology. Zara's injuries were severe, and her telepathic scream had damaged her brain. The doctors were not sure if she would ever wake up again. Jake spent 2 weeks in intensive care fighting off poison and infection. His body had absorbed enough jungle toxins to kill 3 normal people, but somehow he kept living. The doctor said it was impossible, but Jake's will to survive was stronger than the poison trying to kill him. While Jake recovered, Zara lay in a medical coma. Her brain activity was almost zero, and her vital signs were barely detectable. The doctors prepared her family for the worst. Even if she lived, she might never be the same person again. The telepathic damage could be permanent. But on the 10th day, Zara opened her violet eyes and asked for Jake. Her voice was weak and her thoughts were confused, but she was definitely alive and aware. The first thing she wanted to know was whether the human soldier who had saved her was okay. The doctors were amazed by her recovery. When Jake was finally strong enough to walk, he went to visit Zara in the medical bay. She was sitting up in bed, looking pale and thin, but definitely alive. When she saw him, her face lit up with the first real smile she had managed since waking up. They had both survived the impossible. Zara refused to return to Catherian space until she could thank Jake properly. Her people did not understand why she wanted to stay with the violent humans who had nearly gotten her killed. But Zara tried to explain that Jake had not nearly gotten her killed. He had saved her life when no one else would even try. The story of their rescue mission spread quickly through both human and alien communities. Most alien species could not understand why humans would risk so much to save one wounded stranger. It made no logical sense to put an entire team in danger for someone who would probably die anyway. But Zara spent hours talking to alien reporters and diplomats, trying to help them understand human nature. She explained that Jake had not calculated odds or weighed costs and benefits. He had seen someone who needed help and he had helped them. It was that simple and that extraordinary. The Catherian High Council was particularly interested in Zara's report. They had always considered humans to be unpredictable and dangerous. But Zara's description of Jake's behavior suggested that human aggression might actually be protective rather than destructive. This was a completely new way of thinking about the strange species from Earth. Based on Zara's recommendation, the Catherian government agreed to begin formal diplomatic relations with humanity. The mining rights that had originally brought Zara to this part of space were granted to a joint human and Catherian company. Jake was appointed as security liaison for the new partnership. Jake's superiors were not sure what to do with him. He had technically disobeyed orders by risking his team to save one alien. But the diplomatic success that resulted from his actions made him a hero to both species. They promoted him to captain and gave him command of the new joint security force. Zara became the Catherian ambassador to human space. Her first official act was to recommend that other alien species study human rescue protocols. She pointed out that humans consistently achieved survival rates that seemed impossible by alien standards. Maybe there was something to learn from their illogical approach to problem solving. Years passed and Jake and Zara worked together to build understanding between their peoples. The research station on Zarian 7 became a training ground where aliens could learn human survival techniques. Many species sent their best people to study how humans refused to abandon anyone in need. The jungle that had nearly killed them was now a classroom, where the galaxy's most logical minds learned about the power of illogical determination. Alien cadets who had been taught to make decisions based on probability and efficiency discovered that sometimes the most primitive approach worked better than advanced technology. Jake never regretted his decision to save Zara, even though it had nearly cost him everything. When other humans asked why he had risked so much for one alien stranger, he found it hard to explain. It was not something he had thought about rationally. It was just something he had to do. Zara understood better than anyone else what drove Jake to take such risks. She had felt his mind briefly during their telepathic connection in the jungle. Humans carried something inside them that most alien species had lost or never developed. They could not abandon others even when logic said they should. The galaxy was full of intelligent species that made smart choices based on careful analysis. But humans made choices based on something deeper than intelligence. They responded to suffering and need with an instinct that went beyond rational thought. It was what made them both dangerous and valuable as allies. When Jake was promoted to general and given command of the interspecies rescue service, Zara was there to congratulate him. They had come a long way from that crashed ship in the alien jungle. Jake had saved one life, and somehow that had changed the relationship between entire civilizations. The ceremony was attended by representatives from dozens of alien species. They all wanted to understand the humans who would risk everything to save strangers. Jake's speech was simple and direct. He said that humans did not rescue people because it made strategic sense. They did it because everyone deserved a chance to live. After the ceremony, Jake and Zara walked through the memorial garden dedicated to the soldiers who had died on Zarian 7. Peters and Rodriguez and the others were remembered as heroes who had given their lives in service to all living beings. Their sacrifice had meaning because it had led to greater understanding between species. Zara stopped at Jake's favorite spot overlooking the planet where they had first met. The jungle below was still dangerous, but now it was also beautiful. Teams of humans and aliens worked together in the green depths, learning from each other and saving lives that would otherwise be lost. Jake looked down at the jungle and smiled. Somewhere down there, other rescue teams were probably searching for survivors right now. Other humans were risking everything to save strangers they had never met. It was just what humans did, and Jake was proud to be part of the species that never gave up on anyone. The galaxy was a big and dangerous place full of hostile environments and deadly creatures. But as long as humans were willing to go into the dark places and bring people home, there was always hope. Everyone deserved to be rescued, and humans would never stop trying to save them all.